So as you know, my name is Kat Carroll, and I'm a Clean Energy Communities Coordinator. That means that I also work with the Climate Smart Communities program. And some of you may be well aware of what that entails. And however, I did want to give this brief overview of the pledge elements within the program and how you can begin to move forward with the program itself. So human-caused greenhouse gas emissions have already increased the temperature in New York State 1.3 degrees Celsius since 1970. And dependent on how strong our climate action response is, we could see global increases of temperature between 1.2 degrees Celsius and 1.9 degrees Celsius by 2040. So that is pulled from the most recent IPCC report. And of course, as you get further out in the centuries dependent on climate action, that those numbers continue to increase. So 1.2 degrees is certainly locked in, and 1.9 would be the high range of what we could reach by 2040. New York's nation-leading climate targets ensure that New York is taking action on climate. As you know, with the release of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act draft scoping plan in early January, there are a number of nation-leading targets and a set plan to reach those targets. And if you haven't made public comment on the CLCPA draft scoping plan, I would certainly encourage you to do so. I haven't made public comment yet, but we'll get there. It's a long document. It's 300 pages and 800 pages if you include all the appendices. But I do have a simplified version of it as well. So the Climate Smart Communities program provides state support for local climate action. It provides assistance and clear pathways for local government leaders to reduce greenhouse gas pollution and build resiliency in the face of climate change. It's sponsored by 7 state agencies working to support municipalities to take action in the fight against climate change, including NYSERDA and the and the DEC, among others. Those are the 2 leads. So these climate smart communities numbers are not entirely updated, but there are around 343 total communities registered, 70 that are certified bronze or silver, and over 2,309 actions completed. As I said, these numbers are a few months old, so they have all increased since that time by a count of a few, which is great news. And if we were able to get the town of Warwick to register, then this would be an even higher number. So the 12 pledge elements I always find is a really great entry point to discuss what the Climate Smart Communities program is about. The first pledge element, builds a climate smart community, involves passing the resolution, setting up a climate smart communities task force, and appointing a climate smart communities coordinator. There are also 2 optional actions here, one of which is creating partnerships with other entities. And the other of which has to do with engaging in partnerships with regional or statewide organizations. The second element is inventorying emissions, setting goals, and planning for climate action. So this is where a number of the priority actions come in. Greenhouse gas inventories, both government operations greenhouse gas inventories and community greenhouse gas inventories are priority actions, as is the creation of a climate action plan. The third element is decreasing energy usage. So this looks at the municipal side of decreased energy usage, and it involves such actions as improving HVAC systems, adopting heat pumps in municipal buildings, etc. Switching to LED lighting, both indoor and for streetlights, things like that. The next element is shifting to clean renewable energy. So these are 2 concurrent elements. It's decreasing energy usage in those areas where it's possible, shifting to electrification, and then shifting to clean renewable energy. So you can earn credit for this action by installing solar, by installing wind, through taking a number of clean and renewable energy actions. Climate smart materials management involves the environmentally sustainable management of materials. Climate smart land use is typically of interest to planning and zoning boards who are interested, or organizations like Sustainable Warwick who might be interested in conserving particular areas of land and ensuring that development is concentrated towards those areas where development already exists, in order to minimize the land usage of the town and make sure that the development really makes sense and is well planned. The next pledge element is supporting a green innovation economy, which requires engaging with businesses to really move forward green innovation. Enhancing community resilience to climate change. This is something that this is a pledge element that the Hudson River Estuary Program really focuses on. And it involves essentially climate adaptation, which means ensuring that not only are we mitigating climate change and reducing emissions and taking action on the global scale and on that larger scale, but we're also preparing our communities for things like floods and heat waves. So there are a number of actions there that might be of particular interest. Informing and inspiring the public is, again, the process of education, which is a key motivator for this program. Engaging in an evolving process of climate action essentially means continuing to take these actions and continuing to use things like the Climate Action Plan to actually drive development and growth in the town. And then the innovation and performance pledge elements are basically coming up with new, interesting, and effective ways to take action on climate. And the performance element is reducing emissions from greenhouse or from municipal buildings significantly over a period of time. So that is an introduction to what the Climate Smart Communities program is about, and some of the reasons why a community might want to engage in it. There are a number of resources. As you know, the first introductory step is to register as a Climate Smart community, then establish a Climate Smart Communities task force and appoint a Climate Smart Communities coordinator. So these are two crucial steps. The Village of Warwick has already registered as a Climate Smart community, and potentially, if the village board is interested, they could pass a resolution to establish a task force, including some of the members of Sustainable Warwick. You guys as volunteers are a really invaluable resource for municipalities, essentially. And some of the priority actions that I wanted to highlight, these are things that, you can do under the purview of the Climate Smart Communities program, but you can also communicate with your town board and village board that these are things that you're interested in doing and in participating in. The Climate Smart Communities program is a way to essentially a pathway to guide you towards comprehensive climate action. But it's also possible to do things or to start things like a greenhouse gas inventory or a natural resources inventory without fully going forward with the entire Climate Smart Communities program. So those are options that I wanted to bring up. A couple of the other priority actions include climate action plans, climate vulnerability assessments, building energy audits, and climate change education. So those priority actions are really the ones that you can focus in on if you have limited time or limited effort that you can put towards this. These are some of the most important actions that you can take to fight climate change within the municipality. So I wanted to also quickly note that there is a way to explore more climate smart communities actions. The Hudson Valley Regional Council, my organization that I work for, has created a series of videos teaching folks how to navigate the Climate Smart Communities portal. And you can access them. I can send the link around afterwards, but it's hudsonvalleyregionalcouncil.org/CSC tutorial videos. And they essentially walk you through the entire portal. They teach you everything you need to know about how to use the portal, how to access actions, how to understand what the action actually means, etc. So they're a really useful resource. There are also grants available for climate smart. So one of the things communities are typically interested in is, what will certification actually bring to my community? And the first answer is, of course, that it'll help you plan for climate change. It'll help you adapt to climate change and ensure that when floods do occur, your community is well prepared and can quickly bounce back. And when heat waves do occur, your community is well prepared. So that's one side of it. But becoming a registered climate smart community adds more points to any application that you would put in for a climate smart grant. And then becoming bronze certified adds 6 points, and becoming silver certified would add 8 points. So there is a slight advantage to the grant application process if you are a registered or certified climate smart community. It's not a requirement. Any community in New York State can apply for these grants. They are a 50-50 match, which means that 50% would have to come from the community, and the other 50%, if the grant application was approved, would come from the DEC. And every year in the consolidated funding application, they release a series of projects that you can get funding for. There are implementation projects and certification projects, and they typically change every year, but the RFP is released when the consolidated funding application is released. I also wanted to quickly show you, and this is, I believe, the last slide of my presentation, the Clean Energy Communities, Climate Smart Communities crosswalk. The Clean Energy Communities program was created as a very short, high impact version of something similar to the Climate Smart Communities program. The Clean Energy Communities program is NYSERDA. The Climate Smart Communities program is primarily led by the Department of Environmental Conservation. But all of the actions that a community takes under the Clean Energy Communities program can earn credit under the Climate Smart Communities program. So it's a really great way to start taking high impact actions and getting points in both programs. And with that, I just have my last slide, which is my email. If you have any questions about this presentation, please feel free to email me afterwards, and we can have a short little discussion now. But this is just an introduction and a starting point to start thinking about what is the process of really moving forward with the Climate Smart Communities program. And is there any climate work you can do, like greenhouse gas inventories or natural resource inventories, without being a designated Climate Smart Communities task force? And all of this is dependent on, the town and village response. But I do think that it's worth bringing up that there are ways to move forward. And I would particularly start with the village and seeing if you could form a Climate Smart Communities task force there. I don't know, you may have tried that in recent years and you might have something to report there already, but that would certainly be an option if you're interested in moving forward with this process. And that is all that I have for you today. I'm happy to take any questions or talk about whatever you folks may be interested in.
I do have one question. Hi, Kat. First of all, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm Tom McKnight. I've looked through every single action to be CSC certified. And I know some of them are bronze priorities, some of them are silver priority, but it's clear that some of them are certainly weighted towards more, I guess, impactful actions. You mentioned the GHG inventory. The one for government operations, I think that's pretty straightforward. The one though for community inventory, to me it seems a little esoteric, and that's one of the few that I struggled thinking through to understand. Well, how would we get after that? The overall community greenhouse gas inventory.
Yeah, it's a big question. Because the community greenhouse gas inventory does typically include like scope 3 emissions of, what are the emissions of all of the residents within the municipality. So it is a bigger, broader question. You're absolutely right about that. The thing that I would say is that not every community that is certified chooses to take on the community greenhouse gas inventory. And the communities that do Some of them choose to work with engineering companies. Some of them have really talented people as volunteers who are willing to do the research and essentially come up with the process. But yeah, it is a little bit more intensive. One of the things, if you're interested in learning more about the community greenhouse gas inventories, is there is a map of the climate smart communities. And I will actually share my screen again really quickly. And show you just what this looks like. So, so we can go through that. So this is the Climate Smart Communities page. And you can click on the map. And on the left side, there's a way to filter each of the actions. So we would go to inventory emissions, set goals, go to select community greenhouse gas inventories, and then do filter. And now it brings up a list of all of the communities that have completed the community greenhouse gas inventory. So for instance, Beacon, you can click on that, view the report.
That's the exact one I was going to bring up, because they have seemed to, they've accomplished more actions than any other community. And I'm just wondering, have you had a chance to work with Beacon? And, you know, clearly they're doing something right over there.
Yeah, so that is a great question. Yes, so now you have access to that little methodology. As if you have a question about a particular action, you can go look at the map and find the community that has done it. Beacon in particular is an interesting case. They were able to hire a climate smart communities coordinator part-time to work for the city. And that's one of the reasons. She's actually my colleague now, Eleanor Peck. And she was during her time there able to move a lot of things forward. Beacon also has a very progressive administration and city environment that has been helpful to getting these actions done.
So that's, and then, so if you take, for example, I mean, you mentioned several times the village of Warwick, and that's, you know, that's my focus, but what would you recommend for a lower budget village like in Warwick? You know, we won't be able to hire even a part-time resource. It would have to be, you know,
and most communities don't. Yeah. Most communities, it is full-time volunteers. Beacon is one of those lucky ones where they were able to hire a coordinator, but a lot of folks use full-time volunteers. There are a couple of internship programs through which you can recruit college level interns. And I, you know, would be happy to connect with more resources about that once there is an established climate smart communities task force. But yeah, so interns, volunteers, those are really how the work gets done. And it is necessary to have an administration that is interested. A lot of times the Climate Smart Communities Task Force stems directly from a conservation advisory council or an environmental conservation commission or something of the sort. And in this case, I kind of think of you guys as that, as that entity that the task force might stem from. But it's certainly achievable to do these things without a funded position. And that's one of the reasons that I'm around, is to really smooth the process.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was a great question. Thanks, Tom.
I want to throw in a question, but I also need to tell everyone I need to step away shortly because I've got something else to attend this evening. And I'm hoping Christy will take over the hostship. She's co-host at the moment. So when I step away, I hope she'll run the Zoom. But Kat, like, what percentage of the towns do pay for a coordinator? And like up in like New Paltz, I mean, they have somebody, but I guess she was actually a full-time volunteer or something. But I mean, it was like and someone who's the task force coordinator, that's like a part-time job or a full-time job, right? Whether they're volunteer or paid. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say it's part-time. It's not full-time because these actions do take time to accomplish. So no matter how much you think about them, the town still has to move on them. They still have to adopt the resolution. They still have to commission the natural resources inventory. And the thing that I tell folks is that every community goes about this on their own timeline and at their own pace. I would say that it is a minority of communities likely that have a paid coordinator. I know that like the cities often will have a paid sustainability coordinator, but when it comes to smaller towns and villages, it's just not as possible. So yeah, that's what I would say there, is that it's definitely a minority that have a paid coordinator, and you should not feel left out if that's not possible for the village or town of Warwick. There are plenty of communities that have gotten very far in the program without having had that.
Kat, we had a discussion with the Warwick supervisor recently, and he had put out to his town board if anybody was interested in being on the committee.
Mm-hmm.
And he got no answers. So he took that as maybe not much of a yes. And is it usually a town person who is the leader of the committee?
No, I would say typically it's not. To have a successful committee arrangement, we always recommend that there's a town board liaison, but I would not necessarily recommend that that person be the Climate Smart Communities coordinator. In some instances it is possible, but both of those positions, town board liaison and being a town board member, and the Climate Smart Communities coordinator position involve a significant amount of volunteer responsibilities. So typically they're not the same person, but it is better more effective to have one town board liaison from.
Because I'm not too sure they're clear about that at the supervisor's office.
Yeah, and that might be something to clarify, is there someone you know of or someone in Sustainable Warwick who would have the time and be interested?
I'd
forward?
volunteer Bill McCoskey, but he may not like it.
I volunteered myself 2 years ago, so but the town board wasn't buying.
Right.
Yeah, so really you would just need one town board liaison and one Climate Smart coordinator, and then everyone else sort of in the Climate Smart Communities Task Force sort of helps distribute and manage the responsibilities of finding documentation, submitting documentation, making sure that actions are completed, all of that.
No, I could try.
Well, we can try. The other thing that is holding up the supervisor, according to him, is that he's not sure that the pledge that the town makes when they sign up is the sort of thing that he could pledge, because he doesn't know what it all means. How much can he rewrite the pledge so he doesn't annoy people who don't believe in climate change or whatever his concern is? But he's really hung up on the wording of that.
Yeah, so that one you can rewrite pretty significantly. I mean, it is a commitment to adapt to climate change, but my impression, and I'll follow up on this, is that certain communities have rewritten the pledge to a certain extent because they felt, this is something that our town wants to move forward with, but we're not sure about this component. We're not sure about this component, or we have different motivations than what are displayed here. Our real motivation is protecting our citizens. So they want to say that instead, or our real motivation is conserving our forests. So they want to say that instead.
Mike, I might recommend one thing. If you look at, so now I'm thinking more on the village level at the moment, but it applies to the town as well, right? Every significant decision must be contemplating the comprehensive plan, just to make sure that anything you take on is in line with the long-term vision of the town or village. That said, if there is, that comprehensive plan can be used as a mechanism to help drive that forward. And I'll give you an example. This year in the village, we expect to complete our updated comprehensive plan. In
Mhm.
there is a section on environmental sustainability. Further, if you look at, we sent out a community-wide survey asking how important was, we called it environmental sustainability, but it could apply to climate change. How important this is on a scale of 1 to 5, and 80% gave it a 4 or above. So that could be one way to help give a tool to the supervisor or the mayor to say, well, people are generally asking for this. That said, we feel comfortable doing this pledge. If they want to soften the words, so be it,
Mhm.
right? But using data is one way to, I guess, protect them a bit or isolate them from otherwise unhappy parties.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great point. And if you wanted to do a survey of the town, as long as it's statistically significant and say, this many folks responded, we got this data, people are significantly interested in protecting the environment. That might be a good option. I would really focus on the village in terms of setting up a climate smart communities task force at the moment, because I think that that's your strongest bet. And that would have to be done through a resolution.
Yep.
And it would have to wait until after the election, of course, to really see how that goes. But a climate smart communities task force, it could be, if the village is on board, the town is more likely to get on board. And it could be the same task force for both the village and the town, or you could separate them out, depending. But there are municipalities like the village of Walden and town of Montgomery work together. Their task forces work together. So,
well, and
So
I
we
think
have 3 villages in Warwick.
mhm.
With so working together is a possibility, but they don't do it much.
Yeah, and I'm speaking specifically about the volunteers of the task force working together.
Can I ask you a question here, Kat? Hypothetically, if 3 villages and the town, there's 4 different local government entities, right? Hypothetically, if there were to be some kind of resource share and the ability to hire a part-time coordinator, what would that look like? Obviously, there's some efforts that can be done in parallel. Some will be individual, right? But if there were to be some kind of cost share, what would that cost look like in your, I'm not asking for exact figure, just an idea, just to see whether it's even feasible.
So I would say if you really wanted to hire someone, a part-time coordinator would have to be at least 10 hours a week in order to get things moving. And I think that that's absolutely possible. A number of these documents, like the natural resources inventory, for instance, could be like, you could create one and have sections that are applicable to each municipality. The government operations greenhouse gas inventory would have to be different. There would have to be a separate one for each municipality. But as you've noticed, those are actually not the most difficult document to prepare. If you do benchmarking, you're like halfway there, essentially. So yeah, so I would say, hiring someone at least 10 hours a week would be an effective point of starting.
And I'm sorry for the indelicate question, but what is an hourly rate for 10 hours a week of someone who's qualified to do that?
It depends on who you hire.
First, yeah.
I'm not sure.
It's okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to get a sense of, what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question. That would have to be negotiated, but I would say anywhere from $20 to $40 an hour.
I think this is excuse me for a minute. I think this is an intriguing line of moving forward. The idea of the town and the 3 villages somehow combining and hiring a coordinator and then moving forward, in some cases 4 as one, and in some cases 1, 2, 3, 4 as 4 separates. I think that could be a very intriguing way forward.
Yeah. So The other two villages, we have Town of Warwick, Village of Warwick, and the other two villages are, I'm not great on the geography of New York yet. I'm from Nebraska, so we're working on it.
It's the village of Florida and the village of Greenwood Lake.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, no, that would be a great way to move forward, I think.
Could you talk a little bit about the extra points on the grant proposals? Because in the green screen, even the most dubious candidates wanted to get, help in building infrastructure. So what is the reality of those points? Or could you just talk a little bit more about that? Because that's a big sell to a lot of the people.
Yeah, so the way that the Climate Smart Communities grant application is set up, it's not the number of points for registering, I believe, as a climate smart community is only 3 out of 100. And the number of points for becoming a bronze or for being a bronze certified community is 6 out of 100. So it's something that could potentially tip the balance, but the real issue for these grant applications is that they are a 50-50 match. So every year so far there's been grant funding left on the table for these DEC climate smart grants. And it's not an easy system to change. But that being said, it is something where I would encourage all communities to apply for it if they're interested in making a commitment to a particular action. For instance, the DEC every year funds greenhouse gas inventories and climate action plans. But like I said, the sticking point is the 50-50 match, and the points allocated towards bronze or certified or registered communities could be a tipping point. But it's not the most substantial sell. The real substantial sell is the intrinsic value of the action that you would undertake with the grant funding.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's my very honest answer. All right, well, if we don't have any further questions, you do all have my email. I'll put it in the chat. And I hope that this has been, some fruit for thought for folks. Food for thought, there we go.
Right.
And I'm happy to continue the conversation as well.
Thank you, Kat, for sharing part of your busy Wednesday night. And we really appreciate everything that you're doing. And,
yeah, no, I appreciate the work that you folks are doing too.
Definitely big thank you.
Yes.
And we will have more to say.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Best of luck going forward and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Bye.
Pat, thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.